Hello, I'm Peter. I'm the GM for the Pirates of the Red Letter campaign, and we have some cool stuff, and I'm sure you've seen it in the videos, and I want to show you how you can make that cool stuff that I've made. The coolest of that stuff, in my opinion, is the boat that I've made, and it's very simple. It looks complicated, but I can show you in just a couple of steps how to make it. You see it has these sails up here made out of cloth. On the board, it actually has some grid so we can actually move our guys around and fight on it, like you see in one of our videos. And hopefully I wish to do a whole lot more of that soon. So yeah, we're going to get to it soon. Let me show you how. We're going to begin with the materials. It's not that expensive. You can go like all the way up with the most expensive paints and cloths and dowels and stuff, but that's not necessary. I'm going to show you what I bought. Some of it is a little bit expensive because I do other things with it, but most of it's pretty cheap. Start with the cloth. You can go with any basic white cloth. There's a bunch of sewing information I could probably tell you, but I do not know it. I just got this stuff at Goodwill. It was a lot, like this big, for only a couple bucks. I'm using it for lots of other things, so you can save a lot of money. The dowels you can get at any basic hardware store, or even a craft store for just $1 for whole large amount. This stuff I had to get at a craft store. I don't quite remember the name, but it's a bit thicker than paper. It's not quite cardboard. I believe it's called architect board, and it's what they use to make those little architect things, those little buildings. And I got that for about $8 for about a yard and a yard worth, and I've used it to make two boats. So we're going to make a smaller boat with another one, so it's a good deal. Now, to make the sails actually sails, you do need some rope, and we're going to be using some nylon thread. You can also get this at a hardware store for only a couple of bucks each. I got a whole lot because I use it for other projects. And this stuff, I believe they actually use on real boats. We're using some real stuff here. Then to get to the more detail work, because with this you can make a boat. It's not going to look very good, but you can make a boat. I would suggest some measuring tape. I'm sure you have this around your house. Some green stuff is very useful. We can do some super glue to put them together, but green stuff is going to do a whole lot better for holding it together so you don't have to be there for forever. Any sort of black pen to mark out where you're doing. And then as far as making it beautiful, you can use paint. The only color you need is some dark brown. I use burnt umber light, and I would suggest golden acrylic paint. They come at about $4 a pot, but you can go all the way out. If you do miniature painting, you can use that stuff as well, but that stuff's a little bit more expensive. And then you'll need a brush to go with that. And there you have it. That's all the materials needed for the boat. So once you have decided you want to build a boat, you need to make sure you know what your boat wants to look like. You can just cut it out of the architect board, but it's going to look weird. It's going to be misformed and everything. So it's good to get a good baseline going. And you might be thinking, how can I draw a boat? Boats are impossible, and it's actually quite easy. So we're going to draw a 10-inch boat. And so we just measure out 10 inches. We got our front of our boat here, the back of the boat here. I'm going to draw a straight line between them. And it doesn't really matter how straight your line is. Then boats have a nice curve there to make it hydrodynamic. So we're just going to decide about here is where our boat's going to billow out. And we're going to have a 3-inch billow. So we just 3 inches there and there. Now we have 4 dots, and on the back we're going to make it 2 inches wide. Literally you could do any sort of size and it will still look like a boat. And we just need to connect these points. So if you've done any of those connect the dots drawing things, you could probably do this. Just go from this point to this point, add a little bit of a curve. This point to this point, adding a little bit of a curve. This one's going to be straight. Now this is the hardest one because it's so far, but you want to try and make this as as smooth as possible. Just draw it and go to there. Just nice and curved, as if you're drawing a giant circle. You could draw it straight, doesn't really matter. Your players probably won't even notice. they'll be so excited that they're playing on a giant boat. And so there you have it, a nice shape of a boat. We have this one that I drew earlier. And what you can do is you can also draw the lower decks on it. And lower decks should be smaller, so you have a nice curve to the boat, because that's how boats work. And once you've decided that, you can move on to the other shapes and what you're actually going to put on that boat. Right, so we cut out all the boring stuff, but pretty much what we did is I just drew out a basic outline of what I want the boat to look like. We decided on some gaff rigging and a flying jib. I did a basic drawing of what the decks are going to look like, and then a scale drawing of what the deck will look like above and below. Once I had that, I took it to the architect board, and the two main pieces here are going to be the boat decks, and for this you really want to measure it out, make sure it's all exact, so when you put it on top of each other, it will look really nice and smooth. There are two pieces that are necessary for the boat to stay in shape, and that's the bowsprit here in front, which will hold the mast for the flying jib and hold the pieces together. You also have this back piece which will hold the pieces together as well, so that way the boat isn't super floppy. And you see I gotta redo the glue on that one so it doesn't just fall off when it supports models, because you're supposed to play on it. For these, it's really just an eyeballing of it. I did a couple measurements to make sure that it would work out so that this would come up to this, which is the top part, and that's the bottom part of the boat. As far as the back goes, you just really need a flat piece to hold it together. I like to add some curves to it so it looks nice when you put it together. Now we get to cut it and get on to putting the stuff on the board. Alright, so we have our pieces cut out now, and if you look closely, it's not the greatest cutting, so you don't need to be an expert to actually cut it out and look good. This is about the same amount of cutting I did for the actual red letter. If you notice there's some blue marks, that's because I painted the sea battle map on the architect board. And you don't have to worry about that. That's actually going to create some extra detail when we get to painting. Now before we paint stuff onto it, we just need to do some basic grid work onto it. And because acrylic paint is slightly transparent, we want to put that stuff on before we get to the painting. And it's very simple, because this is so dry.
I'm gonna put like
some Benny Hall.
some Benny Hall over it.
Okay, don't get sued. You know, like everyone uses that. Yeah. Alright, so we have the grid done. These are wider than 1 inch. But I've pretty much made the decision. The next thing is just going to be so small, it's going to be unplayable. So we're just going to make a very small, thin boat, which is our goal. So you see it's really easy right there. All we do next is we just take a darker marker. We just go over it once I'm sure there's no mistakes. And then when we paint over this with the brown paint, we'll be able to see that black marker clearly and do it again to have a nice sharp line to do our grid. Now that we have the grid done, we need to make some holes to put our masts. And really you just kind of have to eyeball it, make sure all the pieces are on top of each other so you know where the mast is going to go in. And I'm just deciding about here is the right boat spot, and we're just going to mark that with our pencil on both layers. And I'm sure there's a better method for this, but this is what I have done with the tools I had at home. Took an old drill piece and I'm just going to kind of push it down on it and drill by hand. Our drill is also broken, so I'm sure there's way better ways to do this, but this is how I did it, and it works. Once we get a nice hole, we're going to take a pair of scissors, make that hole a little bit bigger so that our dowel can fit through. Nope. There we go. There. And now you can actually see the basic structure of the boat. Looks pretty good. Now we can get to painting the boat. Now we're just going to take our light umber, or burnt umber light. Just going to stick it in there. And I cannot emphasize how easy this is. You might be thinking to yourself, how can I paint wood? But again, as I said earlier, acrylic paint is somewhat transparent, and there's already some texture to this architect board. And all we're going to do is just going to take our paint, and we're just going to lazily go up and down with a giant brush. And because we're being so lazy, some parts are going to be thicker than others. And it's going to look like the natural grain of wood. Now there are different methods if you have a flat board to get that wooden look that we're not going to go into. But there's tutorials online. I've looked them up myself. I do some miniature painting, and I've had to paint wood before. And there we go. In just a couple of seconds, we get our beautiful wood-looking finish. We just have to repeat that process with each piece. It takes no time at all. Now we get to the fun stuff, where we get to start putting it together, and we actually get to see our finished product. And it's pretty simple. We're going to be using green stuff and some super glue to hold it together. I tried just super glue, but it's not enough of a hold to really work. So we're just going to take the bottom one and just stick it in the hole. And it doesn't really matter that it's going to be green. We can paint it afterwards, and that'll work out fine. There we go. And then for the top part, just going to green stuff the bottom of it, put a little super glue on. Doesn't need to be that precise. So, there we go. Press down on it. Alright. So there, so you can see it's being supported from the bottom. And in terms of deck size, it's really up to you. I go for more of a 2-inch to 2.5-inch size, so that way most models can fit there. Oops. But it really can go as far as 1 inch if you just have small models going down there. There we go. Now the boring part is we get to hold it a little bit until it dries enough. And you definitely want to make sure you hold it, otherwise it can end up a little bit crooked. Like if you notice in the galleon video, where the pirates, our lovely heroes, fought a galleon of Zensteni men, it was pretty crooked. I did a quick job with that one, and it didn't come out too great. It was also a bigger project. I don't think I was ready for it. But this small one should look really nice. It should be really easy. I've learned from my mistakes. Right, so that's dried just enough that we can start working on the other parts. And take the back bit, figure out where we're going to glue it. And just take some spots of green stuff, some super glue, and then put it on. Any super glue will really do it. I would suggest miniature super glue, as they tend to have a much faster drying time than conventional super glue or the Elmer's model glue. You want to be moving quick from piece to piece, and you don't want to be holding it for hours on end. And if it's sagging a little bit, that's fine. It'll work out in the end. Once we get this second support piece going, it'll be just fine. nice and even deck for the most part. Now we just have to wait until that dries. There we go, and it's not completely dry, but the reason I like using super glue and green stuff is the super glue will dry quickly, and the green stuff will dry over time. So now I can continue work. This is probably the most difficult part and cause you the most pain, and that's the bowsprit. It's the front part of the ship. And the way it works is we have two pieces like this, and we're going to try and connect them here at the middle part, but also at the sides here for the bottom. So we're going to take some green stuff, first put them together. There you go, so just laying it out there, and we're just going to apply the next piece right up next to it. Hold it there, make the board bend a little bit, because we want this to look nice. We want it to be a cool bowsprit. There we go. There we go. Kind of have to push it a little bit, make the board work with you. There. And that's going to fit just right in there. And we're going to be having a flying jib. And those of you who don't know much about sailing, the jib is the small triangular part in the front. And to have a flying jib is technically it's going to be two jibs. But we're just going to add a lower mast. I don't know the name of that bowsprit mast. And we're going to add it here, and this is going to add some more support to it, and at the same time adding a cool thing from which you can put our jib on. Oh jeez. This is the most frustrating part. It's a nightmare. There we go. Attaching it right there. And then we need to just attach the top part. So now ordinarily I would be doing this with two people, so I can have a second set of hands while I'm doing more work, but my second set of hands is my cameraman. So we're gonna have to make do with just my hands. There we go. So, not that hard at all. And really there's not much strategy to where you place them. I just look and see where it would work out well and place it there. See, there we go. Now our boat's starting to take a lot more shape. It's starting to look like a boat. And we're just going to let that dry a bit more. We're going to work on the mast, or not the mast, the sail, so it can actually move forward. Cool. We're going to start cutting up the sail now, and what you're going to do is you're just going to look at the boat, look at your other pieces. We're doing a gaff rigging, and if you don't quite know what that means, it's pretty much a normal sail is a triangle, but you can get a whole lot more surface area if you make it a square. So instead of just having that lower boom, we're going to have an upper one here to hold up more of the sail instead of just being a triangle. We're going to double up this area there, and this was commonly done in the Caribbean to increase the surface area of the sail and stay closer to the wind because of how the wind worked. It went east-west a lot, so it helped with trading to go further upwind. Once we have our basic shape, we just cut it out. Now I'm using my special sewing scissors because I like to do lots of craft stuff. You can use normal scissors. I would highly suggest a pair of sewing scissors. So I'm actually going to be trying something new. On the red letter, I glued the sails onto the beams, the dowels, And it worked, but it was really hard. I think we could do one better. I think we're going to try using some sewing and sew around the dowels so we get a little bit more natural of a look.
Sew your boat. Gently down the sew. Sew your boat. Sew your boat. Sew. Gonna sew your boat. Keep on sewing your boat. If you keep on sewing your boat. Looks really boring, but it's kind of fun. Sew your boat.
God, I made a mistake. Oh no.
He made a mistake sewing his boat.
Boop boop. Boop 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 boop. He kind of lays him sewing.
10 years later.
Alright, so, I've got the two dowels attached to the string, or the sail, and for the top I sewed it around. That kind of worked. I don't know if I'll do it in the future, but for the bottom one I did some basic just sewing it, just tying it to it, and that seems to work out a whole lot better. So now we got to attach it to the main mast. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our nylon thread, and we're just going to tie some knots here at the crucial parts. And just attach it so it looks like there's some ropes holding it up. And beyond tying these knots, we're also going to be using some hot glue, not hot glue, super glue, to hold it in place, because knots aren't going to do the job alone. So once we got that knot tied, and we'll cut off the ends when we have a moment, we're just going to take some super glue to that knot so it doesn't come out as easily. Oh crap. So now is a good time to explain that mistakes will happen. For example, there's not any dowel here for me to attach to the main part, so I'm just going to do what I did here and sew that to the ship. So yours doesn't have to be perfect, because mine isn't. We're going to tie this lower one on. And once we get this on, it will look nice. It will look like part of a ship. If you want, you can go a little bit further and you can actually add some rigging to the ship. And that's really just the side parts right here, what the people will be climbing up and down. But I prefer to keep the play area a little bit more open, so that is why it's not on it. And now we're just going to take it, we're going to tie it on here. And tying it on gives it a little bit of flexibility, so you can move it around if you want to emphasize different weather changes. Oh my, that's not going to work. And that's also being glued to the mat. Don't tell anyone about that one. Shh. Our roommate Jake really likes that mat. Hopefully he does not watch this video. We'll buff it out. There we go. Just take this one here, tie it there. There. And make sure it's up high enough so I'm interested in play on it, and we'll just apply some more glue to that point. Now gaff rigging is going to have a couple of connections. The first connection is going to be between the sail and the mast right here, but it also has this part up here so that the sail is lifted up. So we just have to do a small knot there. Make sure that is tight enough so it actually holds it up high enough. There, just like that. For this one, we're going to kind of hot glue it around so that it doesn't move around, because if that goes lower, our sail will go lower. And now I get to sew this one part, because I made a mistake. And there we go. We have our main sail there, and you can actually stop here. And what we've done is it's loose enough so you can, you know, move the lower mast or lower boom around if you want to have different sails. And you could just stop here. We're going to go a little bit further though. We're going to add a jib. And all that's really going to be is having a string from here to here and a sail in this empty space right here. And then that'll be pretty much it. As far as the jib goes, you don't really need to measure it out. It's very freeform. And what I'm going to do for that is I'm just going to sail or sew the sail to the string. So it's going to look nice. We're going to work on that in just a second. Okay, so we've made the jib and we've attached it to some nylon thread. And what I've done is I've just taken some sewing and I've just sewed it around so it's nice and tight at all the spots and it doesn't end up with that weird folded crusty look. And then just taking some super glue at the end so it doesn't fall off. And now we just have to tie it on and make sure it stays in a good spot. Now for this, I didn't measure, so we're just going to work with it and see if it works. Look at that, first try is in a good spot. So it's nice and tight. Nice and tight. Tie it on again. And use our super glue on the knots, the spot, to make sure it stays on. And we can just super glue that knot. That doesn't need to be super precise. There we go, and just wait for that to dry. And you know what? That's pretty much about it. We got ourselves a sloop for you the boat nerds out there. And sloops are actually used quite common in the Caribbeans because they were able to go upwind, and that was required for east and west trade. They're very fast and very small, so we've got a very accurate ship here because I wanted to base my campaign off of the Caribbean. Now, if you want, what you can do is you can take the decks and you can add some levels of detail. For example, like you could draw on cannons and whatnot. I'm not really going to do that with this ship. But I did it with the main red letter because that's going to be a ship you're going to see all the time. And by not showing it, we adds a little bit of modification to the ship. You can say that there are cannons, all that kind of stuff. And this is a side-by-side comparison. So hopefully you'll be able to see these two in combat one day. And there you have it. Super simple. Super easy. Leave a comment if you have any ideas about how I can make my boats better, or if I've done something so terribly wrong and you're screaming out that I can do better. And you know what? Come watch our videos where you see the red letter in action, see how it can be used, see how it can increase immersion, and make playability a whole lot better. I'll see you around.